Before we start the interview today, please remember to go on to socialblueprint.org.au to see our upcoming events and things that are happening in the community. Hi Esther.
Hello Amanda.
Nice to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me.
There's lots that I want to talk about with you, get into your headspace a little bit as to how you got from where you started to where you are today. Can I take you back to your 17, 18-year-old self?
Yeah.
And tell me, what were you thinking was lying ahead for you at that point in time? Where did you think you wanted to go?
Right, so at that stage I would have been doing VCE,
Yep.
just trying to get through, hoping that I would pass and then be done with education.
Yep.
I knew I was going to be going on a gap year to Israel after I finished school, and then after that would probably get married, look to meet someone, get married, start a family and follow that traditional pathway.
Did you have any thoughts about what you were going to study, or was that of concern?
No, well actually I didn't particularly have any confidence in my abilities at all.
Yeah.
And I was just going to be happy to get out of school, be done with education, and that was going to be the end of it. Funnily enough though, we had to do preferences, put down our preferences for uni, and I had put down banking and finance because that was always something that I was interested in, but I don't even know if I got accepted. I wasn't interested in second round offers or anything. To me, education, I was finished, that was it for me, and I didn't give it any more thought till about 10 years later.
So at that time, so you were at Beth Rivka?
Yes.
And was that the general, it's obviously a generalisation, but was that the attitude of your peers? Were some more conscientious, were some aspiring to be studying at uni, or most had the attitude like you did?
No, I think most actually had the attitude that they were going to go on to study. The ones who were a little bit more traditional, there were a few who had already pulled out of school and didn't complete VCE, but the background of families of the girls in my class was so diverse, and for most of them there was an expectation that they would go to university. Education in my family hadn't really been such a strong emphasis, and because I didn't feel that I was particularly good at it, I just didn't expect to continue with it.
So tell me about your family. Tell me about the home you grew up in, your background, your parents.
Okay, well I'm the oldest of 4 children, and my parents are both migrants. My mother came to Australia when she was 13. She's from Hungary. My father's family migrated to Australia when he was 2.5. He was born in Russia. They migrated across Europe to France, and then was actually sent to Australia with a contingent of families as part of the Chabad families who started a Chabad community in Melbourne. So my mother's family didn't really have a lot of orthodoxy. So she's come from a non-orthodox background or traditional background. My father's come from a much more orthodox background. Their two worlds collided when they were quite young. They met at a party when my father was only 22, my mother was 19, and I was born 10 months later.
Wow.
Yes.
So,
well, not 10 months after they met. They got married, and 10 months after that.
No judgment.
Yeah, that's right. So they were very young parents bringing up children. They had 4 of us. By the time my mother was 26, she had 4 children, and then just sort of fumbling through parenthood, I guess, like we did when we had our own children.
And so were you brought up in an Orthodox home? I mean, as you said, the two worlds of Orthodox and traditional collided. Where did you land in that?
Okay, so we did have an Orthodox upbringing, and I went to Beth Rivka, and I went to all the Gun Israel camps, which were all Orthodox, girls only, and so that's kind of where we landed, but we were always a little bit more modern. So we had a TV in our home, and we would go to the beach and things like that, but still a more orthodox upbringing. And the shul that I went to was yeshiva shul growing up. That was my home shul.
Okay, so you go on your gap year.
I go on my gap year,
and at some point you get married.
Okay, so not straight away. I came back from my gap year, And then about 6 months later, I spent some time in New York and came back to Australia for my brother's bar mitzvah. At the same time, a very good friend of mine was getting married, and my ex-husband was here for the wedding. Some people introduced us, and then it went from there. And yes, so probably a year after I came back from my gap year, I was married.
And how long after? You've got 3 daughters?
I have 3 daughters, yes.
Okay, and how long after that did you have your first child?
Well,
pretty
within a year.
Yeah.
A year.
Okay, wow.
Yes.
And then life seems to change. And I've read or heard you saying that you pushed your youngest in her pram into the stock exchange building and decided there and then that you were going to enroll in a course. What prompted all of that? Where did that come from?
Okay, so what happened was I didn't have this desire to go and study.
Yeah.
However, I always was interested in working.
Okay.
So work for me was something that I was always going to do no matter what. And I always did work. So coming back from my gap year till I went overseas, and then early in my marriage, I always worked.
Yeah.
But the jobs that I had were very, very narrow in really where it could take me.
Okay.
And essentially, I was working for the companies that my father worked in.
Okay.
So that was nice to have the exposure within a corporate environment. However, they were mining companies.
Yes.
And it was a little bit limited what a nice Jewish girl can do in a mining company.
And I'm assuming you were working as a job, not for a career.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. But I did get exposure to a lot of different things, and I saw that I had a little bit of talent in a variety of things. But the emphasis, well, what really was the impetus, I guess, to make me go study was that while I was working, my ex-husband wasn't really. And at that point I realised, okay, I've got a few children, or I'm about to have my 3rd child. I don't know where this marriage is ending up, but I know that food needs to be put on the table, and I don't want to rely on my family to provide for me. So I need to do something. I need a career. I need a pathway that's more than just admin, accounts sort of roles. And that's when I had my 3rd daughter, and she was a month old. I wasn't working at the time, and I had done a little bit of research, decided that I'm going to do a course through the stock exchange. I didn't need any prerequisites. I could just start with one subject and see how I go.
Okay.
So I wheeled her in, enrolled in the one subject, did the one subject, and got a distinction. And I thought, hang on a minute, I'm the one that failed all my essays. I was really bad at school, although I really was quite good at maths. That came naturally to me. And now I've got a distinction. Either someone's having me on, someone's, candid camera. Where's the camera? And then I started to study a little bit more fervently, took on a couple of extra units at a time, and thought, okay, I'm not as bad as I thought I was, and I've allowed the messages that I received in my education to penetrate that were wrong, and I'm going to prove to myself what I'm really capable of doing, and ultimately did, and finished my first course, and then went on and kept doing some further studies. In fact, I've just finished another course right now.
So
I've had to do
the irony that suddenly you're into studying.
The irony,
exactly.
Exactly. And even the other day I said, okay, now I'm finished that. I'm not doing any more formal education. The exams, those days are over. And then the next thought was, okay, what if I just do the masters? It's only 4 units. I could do the masters.
So at this point, were you still married when you
I was still married, yes. I was still married.
So that would have felt like a pressure, no doubt. I mean, if you were the working parent, you were the breadwinner, and also raising your daughters. That was there support coming from your family? Was there, and I don't just mean financial, I mean emotional support coming from your family. What was their attitude at this point?
Well, there was support. So there was financial support, there was emotional support. I knew, in the back of my mind, I always had my family to rely on if I needed help. But I'm a very proud person. I'm a very independent person as well. And I just got on with it. I didn't have time to think about whether my load was too full or not. I just had stuff I needed to do, and I just did it.
Yeah.
And sometimes people say to me, "Wow, Esther, some of the things you've done, it's quite impressive." And I don't see it that way. I just
You
did what I had to do.
Yeah.
A lot of people do. When you're in a situation and it's a matter of, I want to say survival, but I wasn't really that destitute that it was a matter of survival.
Yeah.
But it's just that instinct.
Yes.
That if you have to do something, I haven't got that sort of victim mentality.
Yep.
And I didn't want anyone to feel sorry for me. I just wanted to do it.
Okay. And then, so how long down the track did your marriage break down?
Probably about 2-3 years later.
Okay. And I was going to say that maybe, how did that change? I was going to ask, how did that change your predicament? You're now a single parent working, but by the sounds of it, if you were the breadwinner before, that wasn't so different to what you were experiencing as a married woman.
Right. So, yeah, it's interesting you say that, because now when I see clients who are splitting up later in life, it's a massive, massive adjustment to their lifestyle. For me, there was no adjustment to my lifestyle. It actually just became easier because there was just one less person to worry about.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't like I wasn't going to be getting money or the lifestyle or the hands-on support. My life just continued as it was. It was a little bit easier.
And so how long after, I'm going to go back. What was your experience, for reasons that'll become clearer afterwards, but what was your experience with your breakdown of your marriage with the Beth Din?
I actually had quite a good experience with them directly. The Beth Din at the time was the former Beth Din.
Yes.
And they weren't so much of an issue in terms of how I interacted with them.
Okay.
The issue more was that when it came time for me to get a get, was that my ex-husband wouldn't give it to me at the time. And I've sort of blurred out a little bit from that whole experience, because I had my father assist with that quite a bit. So I just kept living my life. I wasn't looking to remarry. I wasn't. So for me, it was just, I knew he was taking care of it. And while he was taking care of it, I'll just get on doing what I'm doing.
Yes.
So he did communicate with the Beth Din. He was handling a lot of that for me. But I do recall at the time that when I ultimately did have my experience with the Beth Din, it was very procedural.
And the broader Jewish community around you at that time, did you feel it was a nurturing, supportive community around you? I mean, you're in an Orthodox, at that point, in an Orthodox community.
Yep.
I don't know what their attitude would have been to the marriage breakdown. Was it frowned upon that you were, coming out of this marriage, or do you think, how were you feeling at that point?
Well, I've grown up in Melbourne. I've got my family in Melbourne, and I have a certain amount of confidence and I don't care kind of thing. Yep. So what was being said behind my back, I have no idea about. I do feel that people were supportive mostly. A lot of people didn't get it. Yeah. They just didn't quite understand, and I think they were meaning well with suggestions and ideas of what I should do. And I had some random calls from people overseas at all hours of the night. Seriously, I would take a call and it's someone from France telling me I should reconsider. And I'm like, I don't even know you. Who are you? Why are you interfering in my life?
Yeah.
But essentially, as far as the community here was concerned, I stayed true to who I was. And that's the thing. I didn't start living this wildly different life. I just was me.
Yes.
And people just accepted that. And that was just the new me that they, in their frame of reference. And they just continued their relationships with me as they always had.
Yeah.
I didn't have huge expectations from anyone, and they had none back from me. So it was mostly a positive experience and supportive. Yeah.
And how long after, so you continued to study, increased your load.
Yeah.
How long after that did you decide, I can do this, I'm going to start my own business, I'm going to actually formalize this and do it? Yeah.
All right, so once the divorce matters settled down and I had finished my studies, I decided, the time was right. I need to do something with this. So I started to look for work in financial services. So I had the studies for financial advising, and what was required. I actually had double of what was required at that point, and started to look for a job No one would give me a job. I went to quite a few interviews.
Yeah.
I sat at the interviews listening to mostly guys talk about their lives, not really asking much about mine, just sort of humouring it because that's what you had to do.
Yeah.
I didn't get put forward for a single job.
Wow.
And it took nearly a year to find something. And then I had a very, very lucky experience. I was actually at the park on, it might have been a Sunday or Shabbat, and I saw someone there who I know worked in financial services, and I said, look, I don't even know what you do, but I know you're doing something in finance. Do you know anyone in financial planning? And he says, as a matter of fact, I do. I made an introduction with a lady who worked at AMP, and she was part of the licensing division where they were looking to bring advisors on. Okay. So I went through the ropes with that, and they take you on they make you do aptitude tests, and I got sent to Parramatta for 2.5 weeks and all sorts of things, and ultimately then was set up as a self-employed advisor and had no clients. And then it was a matter of how to build the client base. Yeah. So at the time, I was still doing other work. I was still working part-time for my dad. I was also part-time working there was an accounting practice that had a number of clients that had, particularly older clients, that had their financial affairs sort of all over the place, including literally files. And they needed someone to come in, sort a few things out, particularly the ladies that I worked for were widows. Yes. Husbands have died, they've been left with businesses, lots of files, lots of stuff, and they just needed a lot of hand-holding to understand their finances. So I was able to get involved with things like that.
So go back to the interview process. So typically 90s, 80s, I guess, that attitude
Noughties,
of...
it was
okay.
zeros,
so it's unbelievable, that stereotypical male-dominated interview and that whole process, that it was actually still happening so strongly. Did you become disillusioned during that process?
No.
Did it make you more determined?
Absolutely. So what they would say to me is, the feedback that I would get is, well, you're a single parent with young children. You know, this is a sales role. You don't have any sales experience. I'm like, okay, well.
And do you think it was largely because you were female?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And as a single mother, responsible for little children, not older children, they were quite young. You know, how do you go and see clients at night? How do you leave them? Like, everything that advisors were expected to do with how we operated back then. We're talking 20 years ago. That's how they were judging me. But I studied hard, and I got to where I had achieved what I'd achieved, and I wasn't giving myself a choice. It had to work for me. So if you want to be short-sighted, that's fine. Someone else will eventually give me the opportunity.
So when you then took up that role with AMP, were you effectively self-employed, or were you under the AMP banner?
No, so AMP has a license, and I was working under their license. Okay. So even though there was some branding alongside AMP, I wasn't restricted to their products and services. I'm not allowed to say that I'm independent. I wasn't independent then, but at the same time had a broader range of solutions.
So how do you go from the position where you've got very few clients, as you say, beyond the older women who had been widowed, to suddenly building this client base? How do you find clients? How do you spruik yourself?
I didn't spruik myself, but essentially, how did I do it? So, well, I was given a small parcel of a client base. So pretty much they were policy holders, and I had the opportunity to contact them, introduce myself, see what their needs were. I didn't have a lot of experience, but there's I'm going to bring a little bit of Judaism into this, a bit of Hasidism. So there is this philosophy that the Lubavitcher Rebbe used to tell people, told his Hasidim, in terms of when you go out and teach someone about Judaism, you don't have to know everything. If you know the letter Aleph, teach them the letter Aleph, and then you'll come back when you know Bet, and you teach them Bet, and build on from that. And that was the mentality that I had to learn to take. If you can freeze yourself by
what you don't
thinking
know.
that you have to know everything before you go and talk to someone.
Yeah.
You don't have to know everything. You just have to know one thing more than they know.
Yes.
And when you know that thing, you help them with that.
Yeah.
And then as you compound your skill set and your knowledge base, you go back and you grow. And that's, I mean, I've got clients I've had from day one.
Yeah.
And we've grown together. They haven't needed everything
At once.
Yeah. They needed one thing. We dealt with the one thing. So, but ultimately how I grew significantly was I bought books of business from advisors that were leaving the industry. And once they left and I had their books of clients, I could then go and introduce myself and up-service them, and I had a team of people working for me. So slowly it grew to that.
And I don't know whether the client base was predominantly or has become predominantly female, but you've taken an interest in women and advising females. Where did that stem from? Was that from your own experience?
Yes. So as it turns out today, my client base is not just predominantly women or single women, but initially, yes, that's where it came from. I felt very strongly about the importance of women being financially literate. I'm a female. I have a sister.
Yeah.
I have 3 daughters. You know, I have a mum.
Yeah.
You know, and I just think it's very important for women to be on top of their finances. Don't outsource, or not even outsource. Don't leave all decision making to your husband or to the other men in your life, because at the end of the day, the decisions affect you and how you live your life.
Why do you think, though, that traditional, stereotypical model exists where the financial responsibility seems to lie with the males? You know, do you think it's the women shirking responsibility? Is it a lack of interest? Is it a schooling thing? Where do you think that comes from?
I think it's a combination of things. So when it comes to money and finances, often what we do is what we modelled. It's like other behaviour. It's how you behave in every aspect of your life. It's what you've learned or what you consciously make an effort to go out and change. So we see, like we might have seen our fathers taking care of the finances. So we just think our husbands are going to do it. Yeah. Right? And so I think that's initially where the modelling comes from. Yeah. And also, at the end of the day, the woman is leaving the workforce to have children when women are growing families. Life gets busy. It just gets busy. And it's one less thing you have to worry about doing. So if someone else is seemingly doing it and seemingly doing it in a good way, because your life you might have a great lifestyle. Yes. Then you think, all right, well, they're doing it. What do I have to worry about? What do I have to worry about it? Yeah. And sometimes things are not what they look. Yeah. And people only find that out. Is it largely when, are you seeing these women, or have you been seeing these women over the course of your career as marriages break down, or along the way suddenly they're realising that they need to take an interest in what's going on financially? Okay, so earlier on in my career, until recently, I would see it more when women were getting divorced, because they would not know where any of their finances were. I'd need to help them just source where the information was. Yes. And then they'd realise, wow, how did we afford this? I don't understand how, because there was a lot of debt, and that only became evident later on. I signed loan documents. I didn't know what I signed. That's that. What I'm seeing more now, because now I'm working more with an older age group, is I'm seeing couples where, let's say it's the husband who's losing capacity, so he might have done everything and might have done it really well, but just slowly, while he's losing capacity, losing interest, just not doing things as efficiently as things were done in the past. So that's where I see that. And but the positive side of it is I'm seeing some women really stepping up and saying, you know what, it doesn't matter that I'm in my late 60s or turn 70. I'm happy to get involved and giving them the confidence and seeing them becoming more confident with their finances, people who've never really been actively involved, is really rewarding.
It's interesting because it's, as you say, going back to that lesson, they think that they need to know everything, but empower them by knowing one thing, and then they'll get to know the next thing, and they'll get to know the next thing.
That's it.
So where do you with the benefit of hindsight, and you look back at your Beth Rivka education, and it's probably still true today in terms of subjects that we're taught at school and that our kids are taught at school, where do you think the system lets us down? And did it let females down more so than males, or just across the board? Are we not taught the basics of, no one's coming in and giving you tax basics?
Right. So I don't think this is a Beth Rivka thing.
No,
I think this is just an education across the board, that the curriculum is so full of things that they need to include, that the government mandate need to be part of the curriculum. When you go to a Jewish school, then you've got to add all the layers of Jewish education.
Yeah.
Where do you get time? Where do you literally just get time to put things into the curriculum?
Yeah.
There's this amazing rap that this punkish looking guy does, and it's actually called "Don't Go to School," and it's so much of it. It completely resonates with me because I did a lot of my learning after school. It's just what all this useless information you learn in school, but where do they teach you about so many life skills? They just don't teach you in school, and you expect parents to pass on to their kids, and they don't. So I did design this little program, which I haven't done as many times as I should. It's actually called Start Money Smart, and it's for like 18 to 22 year olds, and it's that gap. But you're leaving school, you're gonna either join the workforce, study, travel, do a gap year. What do you need to know about your immediate finances that you're going to be confronted with now that you're out of that safety net of school and possibly even your parents' home?
Wow, okay. Sounds like it needs to be rolled out more.
I know, it does need to be rolled out more, but I've got two fingers in too many pies.
Yes. I want to touch on intergenerational wealth a little bit with you. And I know you work with families, and it's sort of a two-pronged question. It seems like the older generation, our parents' generation, and probably grandparents really, a lot of them came to Australia with very little, built businesses, built wealth. That's then been handed to the next generation and the next generation beyond that. And there's a different sense of responsibility. And I'm interested in your thoughts on what the current generation feel from a responsibility point of view relative to their parents or grandparents. And I mean that in terms of the wealth continuing and working hard. And also the second prong is from a charity perspective. That traditionally, when you hear about charities and the supporter base for our Jewish charities in particular in our community, it's come from big families or parents or grandparents who are now the older generations, and where that responsibility is shifting, or how it's sitting now with the younger generations who have this wealth, who have received this wealth, and what their responsibilities are from a charitable point of view.
Okay, so there's
a lot in there.
A couple of components. I almost feel like I have to get you out to ask me the question again. Okay, so from the responsibility side of things, I think that the younger generation do take it very seriously if they are taken seriously. Okay, so if they're told what to do, and it's very patriarchal in, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, this is the expectation we have of you, then it becomes a little like, well, hang on a minute, you don't trust me, and it's that typical conversation between, or feelings between the younger people and older people. But if responsibility is delegated in an empowering and inclusive way, and there's trust, and you start with maybe small amounts, and you're bringing that younger generation into the conversation, and you're hearing what they have to say, then there's much more respect, and the desire to be responsible with the money is much more like it's taken more seriously. Because I do think that younger generation worry about a lot of things. They've heard the grandparents make the money, the second generation build it, the third generation spend it. They don't want to be that third generation that spend it.
Yeah.
You know, they don't
Yes.
want to be that.
Yeah.
But have they been taught? Have they been told, or have they been taught?
Yeah.
And there's a big difference between
Yes.
that. So a lot of, you know, older generation don't want to tell their kids. They don't want their kids to really know
what goes
what
on.
they're worth or not. The kids are not stupid. They see their lifestyle relative to other people's lifestyle. They kind of have an idea of where they're at.
Yeah.
So I think if it's done in a more inclusive way that gives them a voice,
Yes.
they will be more responsible.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's
okay. So the second prong of what
Okay.
you see from an attitude perspective
Yes.
with charity, because I know, am I right in saying that you feel very strongly about charity and being charitable?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the charitable side of things, it's very similar. You know, the younger generation may have some different charities and interests that they want to support, and sometimes reconciling that and convincing the older generation that they're worthy causes, that's where sometimes there's a little bit of a clash, because you know, the older generations have their pet projects that they support, but the younger generation are seeing things through a little bit of a different lens. Also with the older generation, what I've seen is they give money away, they know that it's money that's going, they're not going to see it again, they've chosen their cause, but they know it's money that's gone and that's it. The younger generation don't necessarily, I'm really generalising.
Absolutely, that whole, yes, agree with you, yes.
So they want to do that as well,
Yeah.
but they're much more about creating an impact. So they don't just want to see, okay, you take the money and yes, you need to feed people or clothe people or do some social enterprise or the arts or whatever. They want to see the money actually going towards something that's being built and created for a social justice.
Yes. Yeah, they want to see that
yes.
impact.
Yeah, exactly. They want to see the impact side of it. So again, it's bridging the conversation, or if their generations are working together, making an allocation that they give the younger generation autonomy to make the decisions and also respect the decisions that they make.
Yes.
You know, there's no point, and I've seen this in other environments where, you know, someone's being told that they're going to be empowered with something and they spend time and energy, and in the last minute it's completely undermined.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's being inclusive in those decisions. While we're on the topic of charity, your work with Unchain My Heart. Yes. Tell us a little bit about the organisation, your involvement, what it is.
All right. So Unchain My Heart is an organisation that started about 7, close to 8 years ago now. Susie Ivany started Unchain My Heart. It was her brainchild, and the idea was to bring a group of women's organisations together to support the issue of GET recalcitrance.
Yes.
So as it stands now, we're not just a group of organisations. We are now pretty much an organisation in and of itself.
Yes.
And the idea is that any matter relating to someone not being able to receive a GET is referred to us, and we do what we can do to help facilitate it.
So we're working on the presumption that people know, that everyone knows what a GET is. Very simply, do you want to just explain what the process is?
Sure. So a GET is a Jewish divorce. So as much as when we have a chuppah and wedding ceremony that makes us Jewish, it's one ceremony where the rabbi is usually the marriage celebrant, and you're having your civil and your Jewish wedding attended to marriage at the same time. When it comes to a divorce, the Jewish divorce is a separate process to a civil divorce. Okay, 2 independent processes. And for a Jewish divorce to occur, the husband must give the divorce and the wife must receive it. And that process is called a GET.
So then going back to Unchain My Heart, how do you go about doing that? You know, about facilitating when the GET isn't given. Okay,
so thankfully in Australia it's not a huge issue that we're dealing with multiple cases at a time.
Is the group Australia-wide or Victorian-based?
Well, it's Victorian-based.
Okay.
We have helped people in other states, but at the moment it is Victoria-based.
Okay. Yeah.
And we have relationships with organisations doing similar things all around the world.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, which is very important to helping resolve some cases, particularly when you have spouses who move overseas and live in other jurisdictions. We need to have that connection. Exactly. So how we help people, if people come to us different ways. They either come to us because they've just heard of us, they like what we do, they haven't necessarily started the process of a divorce, but they just want to reach out to us. So then we guide them with some resources in how to, like who to go to in terms of what's their next step. But then the other side of it is someone who's contacted the Beth Din, which is the Jewish court that facilitates the divorce. The Beth Din has tried to work with the husband or the wife and hasn't really got anywhere, and then the matter gets referred to us to see what we can do. Okay. Now in some cases it's a timing issue where people are just not on the same emotional
the same point of the journey.
Exactly. And it's a matter of massaging them, getting to them to that meeting point. And you know, when both sides can work with us, it's great because we just help massage it to get it to that point. And people can then move on with their lives. Occasionally we have cases that are really sticky where you just have someone who blatantly refuses, and
feels a little archaic, doesn't it?
It does feel archaic. It does. And we hope, well, we would love to be redundant, and that would mean that the rabbis have universally across the world come up with a solution that everybody accepts. But until that happens, we need to just work within the framework that exists and do what we can do to...
I can't help but think of it as a form of domestic violence, almost, of abuse.
It absolutely is a form of domestic violence. That has already been tried, and the courts recognise that not taking a get or not giving a get or taking a get is a form of domestic violence. And I actually went on record not so long ago to say that where it's a case of a man not giving his wife a get, particularly somebody who's at an age where they want to have children, they may not have any, they want to have a family, it's a coercive sterilisation.
Absolutely. So with your work, your own private work and the work that you've done with Unchain My Heart, has that given you a jaded perspective of remarrying and the mess that can sometimes be caused by that?
Well, it's funny that you asked that because I actually did remarry. And thank you. And I remarried about 6 months ago. Now, in all honesty, yes, it did. For a number of years, I was scared. I saw things at work. I saw things in the community through Unchain My Heart, and that absolutely left a little bit of a scar on me. But at the same time, as I matured and realised that there is definitely merit to sharing your life with the right person, that's something that I'm open to doing and doing it in a smart way and the right way. So
you must be a very different person this time around to when you first were married.
Yeah, it's funny because I have friends who say to me, they say, "Oh, Esther, you've changed," or they can recall the time I said, "I'm never going to get married again." But I met a wonderful guy, Michael, and what I learnt with him was not about trusting men, that I can't trust men. This is what happens if you get involved with men. I actually learned how to trust myself in the process, how to trust my judgment, what I need to look for me, so that I can make the right decision with the right person and then go on and live the best life I can live.
I can hear that you're very much about empowering women. Tell me about, you've got 3 daughters, adult daughters, living overseas. Tell me about, where are they at? Where are they living? What are they up to?
So my oldest daughter lives in Los Angeles. She was living in New York for a little while, but during COVID moved to LA, and she's been there since. And my other 2 daughters live in Tel Aviv. So one went about 6-7 years ago, and the other one went a year ago.
So Is that, from a parenting perspective,
Yeah.
that must be a challenge, emotionally for you. But it's come a long way from, the tight-knit community living in Melbourne as a bigger family, and now you've got, 3 daughters in 2 countries.
Yes. So people often say to me, "Oh, how do you feel? Your kids live overseas. It must be so hard." They talk to me like with pity. And look, it would be nice when we're together. Absolutely. It would be nice when we could all just say, let's go grab a coffee, or let's just do something fun, or they're there for the chagim, or, they wouldn't be living at home at this age that they're at. But I want my kids to be where they can be the best version of themselves. So guilting them into staying home or staying local, to what? They need to be where they need to be their best selves.
Yeah.
So if that means it's America or Israel or wherever that needs to be, I completely support that. They know that they're welcome back home. I renovated my house and made extra rooms in my house, even though they, live away from home.
Yeah.
So they're always welcome to come back.
Yeah.
But they need to be where they're going to be their best selves.
Yeah.
What more could I want?
Yeah, true. And they must be incredibly proud of you.
I think they are. I'm very proud of them.
Yes, that goes without saying. I can see that and hear that from in your voice. But equally, they should, and I imagine are very proud of what you've achieved.
I believe they are.
Running short on time, but I want to end up on asking you, what's your why? In all of this, in the work that you do with Unchain My Heart, with the work that you're doing as a financial advisor.
Yep.
What's the why behind it?
Yeah, what's my why? Okay. So my why is that I don't think life should be so complicated. Okay. I'm really somebody who's quite a simple person who's ended up in a very complex environment, but just people should be allowed to live their best lives. And the way you can do that is by, well, for me, it was to get my independence, to have control over the decision making that affect me.
Yeah.
And I really, really believe that people should be involved in their own journey, making decisions about their own life, good, healthy decisions, so that they can just live an uncomplicated life doing what they love doing the best. And that's sort of my why, is to help untangle the complex information that's out there, to try and simplify for people how they can just live their lives with as little hassle as possible.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
From your mouth to God's ears.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's been so nice talking to you and hearing a little bit about your story.
You're welcome.
Thank you.